get the chance to thank you all again for coming to the fourth Pecha Kucha presentation. Those of you who are Japanese and prefer to have it Pecha Kucha, please raise your hand. Good. Okay, we have 1, 2. Great. I'm sorry, we'll Americanize it for the evening. It means chit-chat, and it is a formalized style of presentation. So many of you are familiar faces. Some of you look very new. There is an artificial tension that's created by the slides advancing every 20 seconds. I expect you all to have your watch out for the first one and irritate the heck out of the speaker, and then it'll kind of lose its novelty. But it's a very, very enjoyable thing. If you don't like the speaker, don't worry, it only lasts 6 minutes and 40 seconds. If you enjoy the speakers, which you will do with ours tonight, hang on every word because there's no time to sort of check your email or anything else. That said, with this particular crowd, never tell a geek crowd, turn off all your electronic devices. It's just like, really? I mean, it never ever works. So I will leave the speakers to your mercy in that particular regard. But thank you all for coming out. I'd like to mention one other thing. We are a Pecha Kucha city. If you go to pechakucha.org, there are about 700 of the coolest cities in the world. In our case, it is a Troy, Albany, Schenectady collaborative piece. So eventually, Philip Morris assured me this year they will get the Schenectady one in gear, and eventually we'll have one there. But the next one will be back at Contemporary Artists Center in Woodside on September 23rd. So roughly a month from now, the last Tuesday, I believe, of September. So mark your calendars for that. That one has a bit more of an artistic bent. They're all weird, so it doesn't really, whether there's a theme or there's not a theme, they're really great presentations. So, without further ado, our first speaker. When you watch the credits rolling on your favorite movies, Lord of the Rings, Avatar, The Hobbit, Planet of the Apes, things like that, one of the things that does not come up usually in terms of the credits, or maybe it doesn't, we just miss it because we have a natural aversion to these things, is attorney. But as an intellectual property attorney, Michael McNeil has worked on all of those movies and is, in addition to that, a Renaissance man who just thinks about all kinds of stuff. He is a Center of Gravity member here and does lots of really interesting things. I will not reveal all those tales, but I will turn it over to Mike for his presentation to kick us off on counterintuition. Michael McNeil, please welcome him.
Thank you, Laban. Thank you, everybody. I first going to apologize. When Laban asked me to do this, I misheard what he said on the phone call and thought it was Machu Picchu night. So I missed, my entire presentation is oriented towards the wrong thing. You're going to have to bear with me. But I will be giving away Inca Cola at the end of the discussion. So, as I say, bear with me. What I want to talk about is counterintuition, which to me has basically 3 pieces. There's a problem or a task or a mindset. There's intuition, which really means the common understanding that is so embedded in our thinking, we think that's what the right answer is. And then there's some kind of counterintuition, some kind of contrary solution that goes against the expectation. For example, if you've got a leaky roof, intuition is get a ladder. That's the really obvious, easy answer. But it's maybe not the only answer. Imagine you're a group of, acrobatic people who are there doing a Habitat for Humanity project, and you've got a few seconds. There's a counterintuitive solution. It's not actually a bad solution. Maybe they just need to paint the eave for a moment. They didn't have to move the ladder. All right, well, that's a silly example. But I would also like to suggest that counterintuition has some deeper meaning as well. For example, counterintuition, or the lack of counterintuition, can literally kill you. An airplane. Those of you who are pilots know, those of you who don't, maybe you also know, if you're flying, in general, you push the stick to the right, you roll to the right, left, right, up, down by pushing and pulling. What can happen in an airplane is something called a stall. If the airplane wing gets going too slowly, you can see in the lower diagram here on the right, that chunk of metal is no longer providing lift. It's just a big, heavy chunk of metal way up in the sky. Not a good place to be. What can happen is you can get one wing stop flying. and you get that spirally twist coming down. Now, you all seen this from the World War II movies. You know, the airplane going down to the ground. If you follow your intuition at that point, you pull back at the stick, you roll against the spin, and you kill yourself, literally. It was the leading cause, stall spin accidents were the leading cause of civilian deaths immediately after World War II in airplanes. Because the intuition of how to manage that stall spin was contrary to the deeper insight that you needed to save yourself. Counterintuition is what you needed and what you do need in that circumstance. Now you're an acrobatic pilot, you understand all about it, you can just go play games with it. But getting there requires overcoming your intuition about what's right. Any of us who drive in the Northeast? There you go. Same issue. The inexperienced driver intuitively overcorrects, tries to save himself, makes it worse. The correct answer, of course, those of us who are experienced driving, counterintuitive, steer to the skid. Deeper, physics. Intuitively, a feather is going to fall, be acted on by gravity less than an apple. Now, those of us who took high school physics or anything beyond know that's wrong, because there's a deeper, counterintuitive understanding that goes beyond the first blush of simplicity. Geocentric, heliocentric. The intuition looking up in the sky is that all those cosmos are orbiting around us. But the deeper counterintuitive understanding is that the sun, and then later on, of course, we got more sophisticated than that, but the sun was the center of the planets orbiting. Counterintuitive answer to violence. The Incan savior of my people. What was Gandhi's real problem? He needed a counterintuitive solution to his lack of military power. Non-violence, the counterintuitive solution. So counterintuitive is not just trivial on the surface. Capitalism. Capitalism is wasteful and inefficient. We build lots of businesses that fail. And yet, that's a planned economy on the left, which avoids inefficiency. That's an unplanned, chaotic economy on the right, North and South Korea. Counterintuitive. One of my favorites. There are basically two ways to get your genes into a new organism. There's asexual reproduction, and there's sexual reproduction. Mating is hard work. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes dates to Machu Picchu. But it has the counterintuitive benefit of mixing up the gene mix. And it allows evolution to do its thing. It allows us to get the counterintuitive product that Darwin pointed out to all of us, 100 and whatever it is years ago. Counterintuitive outcomes really are surprisingly compelling. 3 examples from the military. Conquistadors conquering 4 or 5 million people with the help of some diseases. Submarines, we spent how many hundreds of years trying to stay on the surface of the water? Then somebody had the counterintuitive idea, what happens if we go underneath the water? Airplanes, Billy Mitchell was court-martialed for saying World War II would be fought in the air. It was counterintuitive to the idea of fighting on the land. Business models. Somebody had the counterintuitive idea to say we can give this stuff away and make it better and more effective and actually make a buck doing it. Obviously, those are all 3, MySQL, Apache, and Firefox. Art. We've been trying to have representational models for thousands of years, and along come the Impressionists saying, no, we're going to show the work. The Cubists, abstraction, Jackson Pollock. That's not representational art, that's a counterintuitive reversal of the tradition of art. And yet, today, we recognize all 3 of those as masterpieces. Humor is counterintuitive. It's an abrogation of the expectations. Groucho Marx is funny because Groucho Marx is playing with the social and intuitive expectations of the audience. I would propose that all of these counterintuitive things are worth your time and attention as you think about what's worth your effort in your day. Best advice, don't breathe under the water. Clearly, intuitively obvious. Under all circumstances, no. You definitely need to breathe under the water under some counterintuitive circumstances. I propose, think about counterintuitivity. It's pretty interesting, it's pretty cool, and it's pretty powerful stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm not sure whether we put the note out to all the presenters. You were all supposed to bring T-shirts with your logo or with your presentation. Yeah, exactly. So, moving on to the second speaker. Okay. Let's see here. I'll get there, I promise.
Oh, that's something I haven't heard in a while.
Our next speaker is an escaped academic scientist who, as a way of making a living, invents machines. You may want, those of you in the front row, to sort of shield yourselves during this presentation. I would like to welcome up to the front Ms. Andrea Habura.
And so I'd like to start the talk with a little blatant stereotyping, if that's okay with you. Some professions have very strong stereotypes attached to them. Firefighters are brave and selfless, and lawyers are either heroes or the scum of the earth, depending on whether they're your lawyer or someone else's lawyer. And a scientist is a Poindexter in a lab coat staring very intently at a test tube full of colored liquid. That is how you perform chemical analysis, by the way. You just look at it really hard. The other stereotype about scientists is that they're mad. Turn your back on a scientist, and in 5 minutes, they'll have developed this elaborate machine to either take over the world or reanimate a corpse. Oh, and the hair also gets fluffy. That's the static electricity. But there is a kernel of truth to the stereotype, and it's partially because, at least in the past, scientists often made big, elaborate machines to test or demonstrate principles. And also, some of them were a little mentally unstable, but that's neither here nor there. But some of them were a little more straight-laced, but they were still really inventors. This gentleman on the left with the magnificent neckbeard is Robert Bunsen. He was a famous 19th century German chemist. And the dude on the right was also a famous 19th century German chemist named Emil Erlenmeyer. And while these guys did really groundbreaking work scientifically, they're most famous today because of the things they invented, namely the Bunsen burner and the Erlenmeyer flask. I think these inventions are actually responsible for more science, pound for pound, than the actual scientists themselves were. These are still very common in labs. The 19th century really was a period where science and technology were not really seen as so much separate. In fact, they were kind of snugly with each other. And down here on the lower left is the very first copy of the Scientific American. It's from the 1840s. And as you can see, what's front and center? Not a scientific advance, but an improved rail car. And there's a list of new patents on the right. Even in the early 20th century, the cover art is a big damn piece of scientific iron. Technology was important for science. And that's continued through the 20th century. I'm sure you've seen this device before. It's a micropipetter. And it's meant to move small amounts of liquid from one vessel to another. This thing was hacked together in 3 weeks in a laboratory by a German biochemist named Heinrich Schnitzger. What is it about these German chemists? Anyway, it's basically the offspring of a syringe and a retractable ballpoint pen. It's a clickable syringe. You pick up the liquid, you click it, it comes back out again, and you can set it for a particular volume. So there's a long and proud tradition of hacking things together in the lab, like this magnificent thing from the cover of Scientific American in 1949. But as the century progressed, science got seen as being a little more theoretical, and by August 2014, you had the cover article of Scientific American speculating whether the universe was an illusion or not, which is about as far from a machine as it's possible to get. That's not to say there are no 21st century scientists who do this. This is Manu Prakash. He's a professor at Stanford, and he's the inventor of the foldoscope, the 50-cent foldable cardboard microscope that a lot of you have probably heard of. So there are still some people rocking it old school, but it's kind of rare. And I would like to argue that as a profession, scientists have spent way too much time on the couch and have become too sane for their own good. It is time to bring crazy back, people. So why is that important? Well, part of it is because you interact with your experiments through your technology. Mark Twain used to say that the difference between exactly the right word and almost the right word is the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug. That is also true of your scientific equipment. If your tools are sort of what you need, you're going to get sort of the answers you need. That's why scientists used to invent equipment, to make it better. And I think one of the most exciting things about the maker movement is that it has started to put back into the hands of scientists the ability to make tools that are exactly what they need. There's also a dialogue that you have with your machines that help you understand your science better. I'm sure all of you have heard the story about the discovery of the background radiation of the universe, proving the Big Bang. If one of the scientists working with this telescope had not been the person who designed it, they would have probably said, that hum, it just does that. The designer said, no, it bloody well shouldn't. Now, that is not to say that your average scientist is going to build a large hadron collider in their backyard. For one thing, there's no room. But also, I don't want to downplay the amount of expertise engineering requires. Your average scientist is not going to be able to match your average engineer in the ability to design things. However, they can do some things. And I also think this is a way of sort of breaking the idea that science is big science and big science is expensive. There is a lot of small science that's actually being neglected right now because it doesn't fit into the current funding paradigm. But it's still possible. And also one of the ways you can scare a scientist is by removing their funding. They can feel as if all of their tools have been taken away. In the current funding climate, that happens a lot. And I think it's empowering to know that no matter what, you can still do science, even if you build the tools yourself. And there's actually one guy who's helping to do this. This is Joshua Pierce. He's a professor at Michigan Tech, and he has founded a open source lab initiative. The idea being that scientists can build their own shaker tables or whatever using open source tools. But I also think it's cool to be able to adapt other technologies to science. This is a little open source underwater ROV. Imagine what a group of, say 10 citizen scientists and a couple of marine biologists could do with a fleet of these things. And it doesn't cost hardly anything. It's very liberating. And so, with my last slide, I just want to say that this 21st century, we're actually almost moving back into the past, where scientists just sat down and tinkered. And let's see if we can get science and technology back together, snuggling again.
Thank you, Andrea, that was lovely. I don't think you've seen everybody's backyard here. Some of the things that I've seen may not be the Hadron Collider, but there are a few that are kind of in that general direction. I'm going to invite right away, because we're going to switch out computers, I'm going to invite, he's already up here, never mind. Kevin Buckland is, and I might also invite Ben up, just in case you need to advance Kevin's slides. Kevin describes himself as an artivist. For those of you who don't know that term, I think that you can probably put the meaning together. He is part of 350.org. For those of you who don't know that, look it up. It's an international network of people working to offset the effects of climate change. His latest project, working with a group of people who have had an artist residency at Contemporary Artist Woodside, is returning an art to the capital, that actually originated in the Capital District in full force and started here in Troy. They're going to have a launch coming up soon. I'm not going to spoil his story by telling you all about that, but his group is called Sea Change, and they tend to subtitle or put their tagline, on We All Live Downstream. So, all ready to go? Please welcome Kevin Buckland.
My name is Kevin, and I'm part of an international network called 350.org, and we are working to blend art and activism under this idea that in the threat of climate change, we need to be creating a new world. So why don't we engage people that are creators and artists have the most experience with that? So we came up with this logical idea of we're going to build a flotilla of handmade paper boats and are going to travel down the Hudson River from Troy to Manhattan in the context of the People's Climate March. And this idea sort of originated from an article by Jody Dean about Occupy, a movement without demands. And this context of how can you frame activism in a way that's wide enough that everyone feels part of it, but not specific enough, but not unspecific enough that it doesn't have clear demands that can actually be acted on and create tangible change. And so we've been pairing up with Mare Liberum Collective, the Free Seas in Latin, a Brooklyn-based art collective that is dedicated to opening up people's experience to the water and making that more accessible and affordable. So they basically build boats. So since, for the past couple months, we've been working with them at the North Brooklyn Boat Club and building paper boats. Yes, they float. That's everyone's first question. And about 8 layers of woven, thin, brown craft paper is all it takes, and a bunch of time to do it. And that's what we've been working on here for the past few weeks at the CIC Woodside, where all of you might be for the next one of these. And history is, this is here in Troy. This is a technology that was born here in Troy during the collar boom, I guess. And a guy wanted a paper mache mask for a costume party, and he made one, thought, why don't I try to fix my boat with this? Did that, and then he made a whole boat with it. And pretty soon they were making 45-foot pleasure barges out of paper, and this is before plastic, so this is the first time there was sort of a malleable, flexible material, and this was a time when sort of anything seemed possible. It was sort of redefining innovation by clever use of materials. Paper had only just become accessible because they only had started making it out of wood. But so why paper? We're an artist group, and we like the poetics of it in the context of the looming climate crisis. We're creating fragile vessels that have to be navigated carefully on a very rough river, and we need to do that together. When building the boats, you actually need 2 people on other sides. Otherwise, you have to keep running back and forth. So it's by nature has to be a collective act. And we want to open this debate around the river's commons, not this idea of how many parts per million of cyanide is it fine to put in the river, just this idea of no one can pollute the river at all, because it's none of theirs to pollute. It belongs to all of us. It's a commons. So along our journey, we're going to be weaving together the stories of communities involved with resistance and resilience all along the river, and hopefully trying to weave in their local narratives into this global context of a global ecological crisis that we're facing. And also trying to weave them together and create new connections. And this is a real issue for y'all here. This is a sea level rise map of Troy put out by Scenic Hudson. And this is with 1 foot of sea level rise. The Hudson's tidal all the way up here. So in 50 years, we might be looking at a very different downtown. And storm surges, we know, the dock we want to put off has been destroyed because of Hurricane Sandy. And a lot of other stuff is planned. They're looking at putting in crude oil infrastructure right here in Albany and in Newburgh, New Windsor. And that might well be coming from the famous Alberta tar sands. You don't want that stuff spilling in your river. And this is the global local context. Whatever spills means disaster for the river. Whatever doesn't spill means disaster for our climate. This is a lose-lose situation that we're not going to allow. Already, they're filling trains with Bakken crude, which comes from fracking. These highly explosive trains, like the one that exploded in Montreal last year, these are already coming into Albany, and these are already coming into communities, poor communities, in context of racialized environmental injustice. And that's not all they plan. This is the Sane Energy Project, which is a great name for a project. And this is all the proposed fracking infrastructure. So New York's got a ban on a moratorium on fracking. So what are they doing with all these pipelines coming through from Western Pennsylvania coming through? They're even trying to put one next to the Indian Point nuclear plant. I'm not an expert on this, but putting a tube full of explosive gas underneath a nuclear reactor sounds like a really bad idea to me. So that's why we got to come together. We got to start connecting these local issues to the global context that's surrounding us. So on September 21st, all of you, I'll see you in the streets of New York City for what's going to be probably the largest climate change march in history, the People's Climate March. You can find peoplesclimate.org to find out more information about it. There's buses coming from Troy and Albany. Get on one of those or get on the paper boats with us. And when we arrive in New York, we're going to do a circumnavigation. It's about a 12-hour paddle to go around. And we're going to end with collaboration with the Overpass Light Brigade that spells out these letters. And we're going to spell out we are all islanders, which is the message that the Pacific Islanders, the small island nations, who are the people that are most being affected by this, because climate change is cultural genocide for them. It's not only losing their land, but it's losing their culture. So they are right now building traditional boats, and they're going to sail those to Australia, where they're going to try to stop a coal plant, because the burning of that coal is going to destroy their way of life. So we are working in solidarity with them, and people from all around the world that are going to be coming to New York and organizing in their communities, in Jakarta, in Delhi, in Sao Paulo, all over. So this is an invitation to you, a direct invitation to you, because we are on the cusp of history and everything is changing. And if we don't change it, it will change for us. So we need to get organized, and already there's so much great stuff happening here in Troy, and one of the things you can do is come join us on Saturday. We're going to be launching right here from Troy, from the farmers market. Come at 9:30 in the morning to the southern part of the farmers market. We're going to be carrying the boats through the farmers market in a sort of procession. Bring instruments, dogs, costumes, whatever you want to use to sort of send us off. And then you can follow our journey at seachange2014.tumblr.com. Thank you all, and these are exciting times.
Thank you to Kevin. Our next presenter is a bit of an odd duck in a way that I share. She is a core member of a maker movement who happens to be an English major. And as a result, she has been, yay for English majors? As a result, we think differently than the rest of you people, just so that you know that. Kathy Cesari is a prolific author. She is perhaps best known as the co-author of Geek Mom. I will let her go into the book that she is about to issue, but I will, because it will relate to her, presentation. But I would also say that if you look up Kathy and figure out the kinds of books she has authored, it's not just, she extends the maker concept beyond just things like making robots. It's also how to make your own country and other things that we should teach all our kids. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kathy in her presentation tonight, Conversations with Simple Robots, What Newbies Can Learn.
Is this on? Alright, so Conversation with Simple Robots. This is Keep On. Its name is a combination of the Japanese words for yellow and bouncing. When you talk to Keep On, it spins around and faces you. It doesn't speak in a human language, but it has a very effective repertoire of sounds and body movements that convey what seem to be emotions. There you go. So Keep On was developed to help therapists communicate with autistic children. Its simple designs and gestures don't overwhelm them with too much information. Marek Mikulowski of Carnegie Mellon joined with Keep On's developer Hideki Kazima, who's in that picture there, to add rhythm to Keep On's movements. And the result was a dance video that went viral on YouTube. So in the wake of this popular music video, a toy version of Keep On hit the shelves in Christmas 2012. And that's how I ended up with a $10 version of a $30,000 research robot. I have a closet full of them, actually. It's a handy tool when I do my workshops and talk about the basic components of a robot: sensors, electronics, and effectors like motors, speakers, and lights. Here I am at Maker Faire last year with our booth. Even though it's just a toy, Keep On is actually pretty sophisticated. The robots I talk about in my books and workshops are even simpler than that. Some scientists believe that robots exist on an evolutionary scale. A machine that behaves as if it is sensing and thinking is just a lower form of robotic life. As a STEM popularizer, I have three main goals. I want to introduce my audience to technology and how it works. I want to wow them with tales of robot history and news of breaking developments. And I want to find ways to draw in kids and adults, like this librarian, who aren't naturally tech-minded. You can see how thrilled she was to make that motorized art bot. But there are challenges. Now this Lego robotics kit costs $350. It costs $6,000 a year to field a team in the first robotics competition. And there's a steep learning curve to acquiring the skills and knowledge needed to get started with even entry-level electronics projects. Overcoming these hurdles takes motivation and support. One way around them is to use everyday craft and household materials and recycled parts. This hydraulic robot arm costs less than $5 to make, consists of baby medicine syringes, aquarium tubing, cardboard, and duct tape. I try to scaffold learning by using step-by-step tutorials and kits. And I try to build excitement by talking about the people doing new work, how it breaks new ground, and what possibilities it opens up for the future. This is a tensegrity. It was developed by students of John Rifle at Union College, and it is a robot that's made out of a type of structure that consists of rigid rods and elastic cords to hold it in suspension, and they drive it with a vibrating motor. Here's a low-tech version I made with a KD at the center of gravity. It took us about 20 minutes. It's made from drinking straws and rubber bands. Like the Union College model, it can be steered with vibrations, but our vibrating motor is a part of a Little Bits kit, a little electronic building kit. And here's the next extension of a tensegrity robot. It's called the Ballbot. It was designed by Vetus Sunspiral, a great name for NASA. And it's a possible lander for a mission to Jupiter's moon Titan. Unlike the Mars rover landing system, the Ballbot can bounce and roll, so it protects its payload in the center. You may have seen this recently on the internet. This is a self-folding robot designed by Robert Wood of Harvard and Eric Demain and Daniela Roos of MIT. It's made from layers of paper and shape memory polymer, basically shrinky-dinks. And Demain has proved that you can create any 3D shape with a simple box pleat, which means that self-folding origami robots can be designed to take on any shape as needed. So I designed this little origami inchworm after playing around with Demain's box pleat fold. I like the fact that it's dynamic. If you compress it, it springs forward. And with projects like this, and I have another one that uses paper that's actuated with shape memory wire, newbies can develop a hands-on understanding of smart materials and programmable design. So this is a beam robotics. It's a style of simple but elegant robots developed by former NASA physicist Mark Tilden. Beam robotics are often solar-powered and light-seeking, so that means that they can find their own food in the wild. This one is a TriMet. It uses a circuit called a Miller solar engine, and it's got 3 capacitors which make it scoot along in random bursts. Here's my version. It's completely recycled. It's called the Solar Wobblebot. It's made from an old CD, a solar panel from a garden light, DC motor, and the top of a Slurpee cup. All you need to wire it up is aluminum foil and electrical tape. It's very kid-friendly. And here's the next generation. This is from my new book. I wanted to take it up a level, so I have my readers get a Miller Solar Engine parts bundle from the maker Solarbotics, and it just gets integrated right into the same design. And that's a way for readers and people like me to get comfortable with adding electronics to their projects. So, different types of talking robots. These are 2 robots that are talking to each other. These are a Cleverbot chatbot program running on 2 computers. It uses text-to-speech software and an avatar renderer, which matches the words to the character's movements. You can see this on YouTube. It's a hysterical conversation. They start arguing about God. So I thought it would be fun to learn how to do programming by creating a chatbot. This is a screen grab of the free open source programming language Scratch, developed at MIT. It uses simple drag and drop software, and it lets kids and newbies like me start building programs in seconds. Of course, chatbots are robots without a body. If you really want to have a conversation with a robot, you need something that is as human as possible. However, the pitfall is if you make your robot too lifelike, you might fall into the uncanny valley. So this is Hiroshi Ishiguro of Osaka University and his robot clone, Geminoid HI4. He designed it to give lectures in his stead. In my book, I don't teach you how to build your own robot clone, but you can certainly make a creepy self-portrait of yourself using Crayola model magic, and it just gives you another way to talk about these complex concepts with simple designs. So that's the cover of my new book coming out in October, and it was just a wonderful project to bring myself and hopefully my readers up from the level of arts and crafts to electronics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Our next speaker is a true pioneer, and I think can legitimately be called, most recently, a Troy pioneer. Jesse Marshall chose to bring himself and a cadre of colleagues to Troy in after having the choice of many different locations. And I'm hoping that we had something to do with that, the fact that he knew that he was going to be able to present Pecha Kucha here. But there are probably other aspects to it. So I would like to welcome Jesse Marshall to the stage to talk about Cooperate and Prosper, Margination.
Thank you, Laban. Can everyone hear me? Is that good? Yeah? Okay, great. So I'm going to jump it right in, not pull any punches, with a couple of statistics from some recent surveys about the American economy. So the first one is that 45% of Americans don't make enough money to cover basic needs like rent, food, and healthcare. The second number is that 36% of workers have less than $1,000 in savings. So what story are these numbers telling us? To me, they tell a story of a middle class whose pillars of economic security and upward mobility are crumbling. So the things that we used to rely on in this country for stability and opportunity, things like owning a home, like going to college, either aren't available to a growing number of us or don't have the same power that they used to. So for a growing number of people in this country, you can do everything right and still not make it. So these numbers also, to me, beg some really big questions that I think we should all be kind of collectively asking. One is that if we're dealing with an economy with less money and less stuff for everyday people, we need to figure out how to live better with less, how to reduce our cost of living, how to share stuff. And the second question is, how are we going to create our own economic opportunity? If the greater economy, at least for the time being, in kind of a stagnant political climate, isn't going to do it for us, how are we going to create jobs? How are we going to pool our resources? And how are we going to create upward mobility for people? So there are a lot of answers to this question popping up all over the place. We are sitting in one right now, right? The center of gravity is a maker space where people share resources and they collaborate. It's a community of collaboration where people exchange ideas and skills to participate in technological and business innovation. So we kind of think of ourselves at Margination in similar terms as part of a similar movement, or really the same movement. But the difference for us is that we're building a maker community for the working class and for participants in the service economy. So this is us, working from the upper left. That's Ramon, Matthew, Kimberly, Blaine, Francie, Francisco, Georgia, Rick, and myself. And we bring experience from the world of nonprofit, community development, education, business, and the arts. And for us, that diversity is kind of at the core of what we're doing. Because we kind of view ourselves in this beginning group as a microcosm of the larger vision that we share. These skills that we have allowed us, with very few resources thus far, to kind of bring this seed to germination of what we're doing here. So we settled last November in North Central Troy, which is just a little ways up from here. And we chose North Central and Troy because it's typical of a lot of communities and the kind of community that we think we can create a model for nationally. So here it is. This little catchment area here is from Hoosick to 108th Street, right along the river. And that logo is more or less where we're currently based, where our first property is. And some numbers about that area. 40% of residents are people of color. 44% live in poverty. And the home ownership rate is 17% in that area. Now, we also, though, believe that these kind of communities are fertile grounds for alternatives and solutions to the much wider spread problems like the ones that I was kind of started the presentation off with. So here we are, margination. What are we? We're building a network of small businesses that share resources and support one another. So Margination as an organization provides a shared infrastructure of tools, equipment, business services, and property that our community of entrepreneurs shares in order to start businesses, create jobs, and provide training. So this is what we've done so far since moving to Troy last year. The 9 of us have started 2 businesses. Piping Daughters is a building trades cooperative. Hypergeist Creative Studios does branding and web development work for clients all over the country. And what's happening right now thus far is a really nice kind of case study of the broader vision. So Ramon and Francisco have decades of experience between them in the building trades, but they've always had to work for somebody else. Georgia has a great wealth of experience in repurposed materials and kind of a very keen aesthetic sensibility. Francine and Rick have business experience that has allowed them to help the 3, Francisco, Ramon, and Georgia, start Poppy and Daughters. And meanwhile, Matt and Blaine have given Poppy and Daughters a great kind of graphic identity and communication strategy. And so out of very little, this team has supported itself while it's creating these opportunities for others. So what's happening next? This fall, we're entering the next phase of the project. We're about to start raising money to purchase a large commercial space in our neighborhood that will serve as a center of business incubation and an ongoing hub of community and training in North Central Troy. So the space, these are all kind of evocative. We're working on our own renderings actually right now. But the space will have a commercial kitchen, a workshop, a media studio, flexible gathering space, and retail space that our community of entrepreneurs will share as they build businesses, train residents, and create jobs. So this is all building towards this larger vision, which is of a community of people committed to one another's success, an infrastructure that they share of tools, equipment, and property, and then a network of businesses that cooperate in providing jobs and training people in the community. So stay tuned for much more. Please give us your email address if you're interested. We're on Facebook, and there's going to be a lot of exciting announcements and good stuff to come. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. So Jesse didn't say, but I just want to point out that there was one point at which they considered quite a number of communities. And out of those very communities that they had a choice to go with, they chose specifically Troy. And moved here as a group. They were not Troy natives. They chose to come here because of what they saw here. So very, very pleased to have them as partners in the maker movement and in kind of a revolutionary experience or experiment in urban living. I would like to now welcome to the stage Robert Hirsch. He is an activist, an anarchist, I think is safe to say, an inventor, and an ardent follower of Queen Mab. He will talk to you with the title Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Maker, a journey through the realm of steampunk. Please welcome Robert Hirsch.
This is remote work. My English accent isn't coming through. It's strange. Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Maker. I'm going to go through a little bit about steampunk, a genre I'm kind of a big fan of, as you can tell maybe. But the problem I'm going to have is that steampunk is quite a large genre of stuff. I'm not going to be able to squish it all into 6 minutes, 40 seconds. What is steampunk? There isn't a dividing line of what it is and what it isn't. I think the best explanation I heard was it's a type of fiction where the future has happened in the past. All right, so you can think of it that way. It's generally very optimistic, so it doesn't have a lot of darkness that you see in a lot of fiction these days, despite my dark pictures here. The engineer, the inventor, they are kind of main characters in steampunk fiction. A lot of emphasis on ingenuity and using technical skills to get out of things. When I talked about there not being a specific line of what is and what isn't steampunk, you can look at some of these blimps or dirigibles maybe. They all have different looks and different features and so forth, but these are all steampunk. They have the materials, they've got kind of the old look with the modern possibilities with it. Weapons are another thing that is highly steampunked. If you look on the internet, there's tons of them. Here's a bow, a sword, a little gun, a big gun, maybe a flamethrower. This is a portal gun for those of you who play that game. The cool thing about cosplay and steampunk events is that people have the ability to really get into it. They dress for it. You can do something as simple as take a Victorian clothes and put a set of goggles on it, or you can go crazy with the equipment that some people make. The most detailed and most interesting things I've seen so far are people who are kind of doing android or cyborg type of things. So you can see these arms, it's hard to see in this light, but very detailed, a lot of gears, a lot of mechanics, very beautiful. This last guy on here, not him, but the next guy here I just put on here because he cracks me up. So anyway, also vehicles. So steampunk has a lot of vehicles in it. You'll recognize a few of these, motorcycle, car. But if you go through the genre, you'll see a whole bunch of other stuff. The whole train tank kind of thing. And a lot of video games have various things. This is out of some video game, I'm not sure which one. All with a steampunk kind of look. One theme that comes up in steampunk a lot is war. Despite it being a very optimistic kind of genre, people can do anything, you do see a lot of war. Some conquistadors that have been steampunked, brought forward maybe. Automatons and a lot of mechanics through war, from king and country kind of things. Steampunk's made it into movies a lot. This is Hellboy. That's Wild Wild West, very well known to have steampunk influences. More recently is Hugo. Had a steampunk automaton and a lot of looks. Anybody who's a Doctor Who fan, a lot of steampunk in the TARDIS. One of my favorite things that people do with steampunk is mash up stuff. So this is, if you can recognize Luke and Leia here, R2. They've been steampunkified here with kind of old looks and old kind of materials and so forth. I really kind of like when people do this kind of thing. And it's not just Star Wars and other movies, you'll see it in superheroes. I got two Iron Man here, two different Iron Man. Batman up here. Deadpool is probably the coolest one I've seen so far. I don't know if you're into superheroes or not, but Deadpool. I realize Batman's a little out of control here, but it's still fun. Maybe he's a little over the top. Dorothy can't get away from steampunk. I guess the Tin Man has kind of made various people reimagine the Wizard of Oz as a steampunk kind of thing. It was included in the movie. Later on, there's another one called Tin Man that had a lot of steampunk influence. So there's a lot of different stories and movies that use the influence. I don't know why tentacles are important to steampunk, but you see it a lot. I've seen a lot of wall fixtures and costumes that have tentacles. I suspect it has to do with Captain Nemo, Jules Verne's Captain Nemo, even though the term steampunk was coined after that movie was made, but regardless, there's tentacles in steampunk. Goggles. It's almost mandatory. You gotta have goggles. It can be simple like this, or really wackadoo like this one down here. Or you know what, it could be anything in between. You've got, basically, it's probably the simplest accessory to your steampunk costume. So on that, let me just spend my whole 20 seconds talking about how you can make some, since this is a maker thing. Usually plumbing equipment works. So you can take some plumbing tubing, take a little piece of paper and cut out the side of the goggles, use that piece of paper as a model for cutting some leather, wrap the leather around some PVC tubing, put the nuts back onto the PVC tubing and use some leather to make a band. Voila! You have goggles, $10. So, or you can go a little crazier and get something like this and modify them if you like. As I said, it does go a little bit crazy. I do have an ulterior motive for this. Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. If you want to get crazier and more into steampunk, there are various materials that are important to it. Brass and copper, you see a lot of. Different kinds of woods that have a lot of grain to them, leathers, either part of the costume or part of the equipment you might be making, lots of gears and dial gauges and so forth. All fun to all incorporate. Now, I'm just going to get into, I did have an ulterior motive for coming here. This is a picture of text, so I'm not breaking a rule. There is a steampunk, Troy's first annual steampunk event happening October 4th on River Street and First Street. You will see lots of vendors and bands and so forth. You'll also see Queen Mab, Dr. Catastrophe, hello? And she's coming to return to the city and take it for herself. Dr. Catastrophe is trying to prevent her from doing so. That is the event that's happening on October 4th. I hope you guys can come. I also hope we can get some help. If you want to be part of this, dress up silly like this, steampunk tank. Feel free, there's some paperwork over there you can pick up, or just talk to me later. Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Our next presenter is herself, in my way of thinking, not only a musician and an artisan, but also has great, she doesn't characterize herself this way, but I think she has a great chance of becoming an emergent urban legend. She has been featured recently in All Over Albany, for those of you who may have seen that. She was not able to bring samples of her work here tonight, but maybe you'll get a chance to see that. We hope that she will be a future Center of Gravity member. We'll see how that works. I would like to have you all give a warm welcome to a woman who began life in the Bronx, now lives in Albany, and is a strong emerging part of the Tri-Cities area, Sean Desiree.
How's everyone doing? Good. I wanted to set the mood right and just play a little music for you in the background. So bear with me for 1 second. Is that okay? Anyway, I'll start and then I can do it. Okay, well, I'll start. Can I start with yay pallets? Yay pallets! They like to give a shit about pallets. So this is a picture of me. This is not how my journey began, but I used to work in the tax department for New York State, and it was misery. It's a call center where you're getting bombarded with call after call. People are angry about I never received my taxes. At the same time, I'm also a musician. While doing the 9 to 5, it's pretty hard to stay creative and do something that makes you happy. And I feel like a lot of us lose our creative potential working 9 to 5s that maybe we're not so into. And so I took a risk. I didn't quite fall out of the sky with an umbrella. I took a logical risk in a way, which is to quit my job. And it's definitely worth it because I was waking up at a nightmares thinking about taxes and having like panic attacks. And I wanted a way to find the independence. And I didn't think it would lead to, but this is my father right here. And I don't know him that well now, but when I was 10, I saw him lose his job and start to make furniture out of like nothing. He taught himself. He never taught me, but I think just seeing him doing it impacted me and feeling like I could be able to do it. And another big influence is my mom. She's a musician, and I used to go to her shows and rehearsals and sit at the bar, drink ginger ale or whatever I was drinking at the time. And she was in this like political soul rock fusion called New Voices of Freedom. This is like a typical scene as far as like palettes. I started to make my first palette tape because I wanted one, but it's too expensive. So I was like, oh, let me try to do it. I'm a very visual learner, so I just looked at a couple of pictures of tables, and so I made one. This is like how I feel when I take palettes, because sometimes you talk to people, sometimes you don't, and you're just like, oh, I think this is cool, right? Usually it is cool, because it's going to go in the garbage anyway. So this is me taking a palette, and I'm doing all this without a car. I do not have a car, somehow magically making palettes and selling them. I do this also for another reason, because palettes just go into the garbage, basically. So the U.S. is the #1 trash producer. And so I feel like it's important to use something that would otherwise go in the trash and make something new out of it instead of that. And so this is a picture from all over Albany. Thank you, all over Albany. And this is the first one I actually sold. And I use the palettes have a great wood variation, so I use the different woods in order to accentuate the patterns that I make. And I feel like I want to do something different besides make a table. And so I add kind of like a aesthetic to it. And a lot of times I work with people to decide like what kind of style are we going to make for this one. And this one is like a runner table because of how long it is. And I don't use any dyes. I just use the woods and place them in places where it makes sense. And I do not use any like chemicals. This is another one, which is a kotatsu table, which is a traditional Japanese table. And this was another risk. You just kind of like lift the table up, you put a blanket under it, and then underneath that is where you could put a heater, where in the winter you sit at it, do your long hours of studying, and you're like warmed like from your feet up and like are covered in a blanket. And it was just based on my friend being like, oh, can you make this for me? And me just looking at it and like figuring out, okay, I think I could do it. And I think it's very important, like a lot of us don't take enough risk because it's very scary to just like lose your job. This is another one that I made, which is a bookshelf. And the person was like, I just want this kind of bookshelf, and you could do whatever you want, which I really like to do because I feel like you can use the woods that you get to figure out what is it going to be. And I always try to do something different with each one. And my main tool is a chop saw, to get the 45-degree angles. It's definitely essential. The main thing that allows me to do this is my family. I I feel like it's a lot of pressure within family systems where it's like, okay, we need you to be stable, we need you to be, like, why are you being selfish, why you just quit your job? So being able to surround, like, being in a family where it's like, it's okay, like, we'll figure it out, like, opens up the world, you know, to you. And I feel like now I'm starting to strike a balance between furniture making and music. This is a picture from my CD release show that I had, and it's my first album I'm putting out, and it's allowing me to focus more on music. I wouldn't have been able to do an album if I was working 9 to 5, I think, creatively. And this is a picture of the CD covers that I make. I think it's important to keep like a DIY aesthetic. It's not aesthetic, but like mission. I made these out of plastic bags and I just like ironed them together. I think when you don't have a lot of money, I don't have a lot of money, it makes you be more creative. Also, when choosing to do this, it's not always just a choice like other people talked before. The rate of unemployment is really high, and it's exacerbated by if you're like a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're transgender. It all actually creates barriers. And it's not just about like, if I work hard enough, then I'm gonna make it. You know, it's not just about that. It's like a hierarchy. For capitalism to function, someone has to step on somebody else to get there. People to get high salaries, someone has to make low salaries. And I want to try to not to be in that system if I can help it, and try to make my path in the world and be happy. So that's basically it. Thank you. One more thing. I also do music, obviously. So I have a show September 13th at the Low Beat. And if people want my music, I have download cards you can have for free. And I also have 2 albums that I'm selling. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. The next presenter that we have is has entitled his talk, interestingly enough, this is doing this thing again. Okay, great. I'll see if you can play for a second.
I don't sing, so.
You have no idea what it is that is.
They heard me,
I can hear mine.
I think, God help.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Everything's working fine. I'm just teasing everybody. Our next presenter, Tim Stowell, has entitled his presentation "Life Lessons Learned," which is an ancient Pecha Kucha trick to let you talk about absolutely anything and get away with it. But Tim is an information security expert and an artist and a dad, and not necessarily in that order of importance. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Tim.
Thank you. I realized as I was putting this thing together that I'm going to start off talking about my grandfather, but I really could have done the whole thing just on him. I was blessed with a really cool grandfather who was born in 1899. And my grandfather said something to me that was really important. He pointed out, he said, I was born in 1899. Look at the things that I have seen. Imagine what you are going to see. He told me this when I was 10 years old. I have witnessed everything. Most people go through life letting crap happen. Because he said that to me, I have witnessed things, including, that's the very first terminal I ever used, and it belonged to a prime machine. I was also blessed in high school. Our high school was the first school in New York State to have that prime mainframe. That's not me. And I had a great computer person that allowed us to beat the hell out of that thing, and I learned a lot about computers. And then I went to school to become a chemical engineer. 4 out of 5 chemical engineers always smile. But when I was there, I learned I did not want to be a chemical engineer. When you tell your mother in your junior year that you don't want to be a chemical engineer, and for the first time in her life, she swears and says, what the hell do you want to be then? The correct answer is, a minister. I left and I became an artist. Made great earthenware, clay, and pottery. Now you may ask, what does that have to do with technology? Well, I will tell you the truth about it. Pottery are the first technological geniuses. The pottery wheel existed before the wheel. The wheel was inspired by a potter spinning a rock because it was a pain in the neck coiling the clay. I also started doing a thing called raku. The best part about raku is you learn how not to be a perfectionist because everything you do is a gift to the gods because 80% of it is broken while you're doing it. Then I went and I started to work on the internet at a company called PSINet. In 1998, that was the internet. This was the internet 2 months ago. That little section is like that little section. I was blessed with working at PSINet, and while I was there, I had 2 children. We had help. Technology, in vitro fertilization, gave us twins. That was the moment when my heart, I was the first human being to hold both of them, and my heart was just like the Grinch's. It was an amazing moment in my life. And that led me to read all kinds of really cool books. How Do Dinosaurs Go to Sleep? The Sneetches. This one, The Terrible, Rotten, Horrible Day. Alexander. And the best part of it is, the way it ends, it says, my mother said some days would be like this. That's it. Some days you had it. And The Paper Bag Princess. Go out, buy it, read it. My 2 boys were just amazing boys. They were amazing. They grew up, they went to kindergarten, and we had a lot of fun. And we had this most magical summer in 2006 in which we did a lot of cool things. They got to see me run a marathon. Technology, I ran 24 miles. I stopped to get my picture taken with Jasmine. She's talking on the phone. And this is me horsing around, and that's riding a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, just being the most amazing summer. And Ben was a really amazing kid. Oh, the boys loved it. Those hoops, I told them that was the only toy that their great-grandfather had to play with, was a hoop and a stick. Went over well. But Ben never gave up. This was a 1 mile, a little kid's run, and he did it. And then one day, osteosarcoma hit us. Ben in 2006 was diagnosed with osteosarcoma in his right humerus. Pediatric cancers are the most evil thing in the world. Pediatric diseases are horrible, but cancers are really bad. And the main reason they're really bad is we don't spend enough time trying to fix them. But the boys, their journey changed when he was 6 years old. And the Green Dracoman is a superhero, and this is where the lessons really come in. Ben taught me so much. I will tell you right now, it is sad, Ben has passed away. He passed away in 2009. But if you ever have chemotherapy, when you get done, find a tilt-a-whirl and go on a ride. That's one of the things I learned. The other thing he taught me was, do what you can. You can always do something. The week before Ben passed away, he saved up his energy, and one of his last interactions he had with his brother was, as his brother walked by, he found the energy to jump up off of the ottoman and pants him. That's the way to live your life. These are just amazing people that all took their only day off for the summer to come and play. Ben loved baseball. He finished chemotherapy, had double thoracotomy, which is they spread your ribs, and he played. He's the only player, owner, manager of a Little League team in the entire history of Little League, North Colony. One day, he swung and missed. He swung and missed. 8 times he got struck out. 8 pitches. He walked back to the dugout, sat down. One of the parents heard him say, geez, it never took him 8 pitches to strike me out before. I did great. Ben was hell-bent on learning how to snowboard. He learned. We used to talk when we were going about me becoming an instructor at the program. After he passed away, the instructors at that program, Double H, taught me, and now I am an instructor in snowboarding, and I help kids. This dress, you may see me at a 5K near you. I do the Bridesmaids 5K, the bottom has ribbons on it. And I love that dress because it spoils people's day. They come up, they take their picture with me, and they go, "What's with all the ribbons?" And I say, "Well, the 88 ribbons that are on the bottom all symbolize a child who had cancer. And the little things that are here, each one of those symbolizes a person, a child, who will never wear a dress or never wear a tuxedo." And I watch as their face goes, and they realize that there really is nastiness out there. But it's not sad. It is, but it's not, because I'll tell you why. One of the things I've learned is that with every tear, somewhere hidden in that tear is joy, because nobody cries over assholes.
Thank you, I knew you would enjoy that one. We have one more presentation for you this evening, another treat. This one is, I'm going to ask Mick Sapolo to come to the stage. Mick is one of my closest partners here at the Center of Gravity. He is, I must say, one of the most versatile people I've ever met. He is also one of the kindest and most generous people, to a fault, that I've ever met. He is going to talk to you tonight about something we sometimes neglect to consider, called sand. Please welcome Mick Sapolo.
Thank you. It doesn't automatically, you gotta hit it once.
All right.
But I cheat because you're gonna see it again. So what is sand? It's really a size of things. It's what we break down, or what the earth breaks down. Most of the sand that we see is less than 1 billion years old. And somehow we think time is associated with sand. And how is that? We see sand sculptures, we see things go away, we see things built from it. This is a size of sand from 2 millimeters down to 625,000, actually microns. So these are different types of sand, and these are all organisms, or started as organisms. Coral sand, Eupiad sand, and something called Formiferia, or it's some kind of amoeboid. And this is going really fast. As this might tell, the sands of time go really quick. And sometimes there's signs, time for change. Sometimes you need time for faith. And sometimes it slips away. There's just so many things that sand is in our life. We see walking on the beach with or without your kids. There's things that are made out of sand. There's digital timekeepers that are sand-like. There's footprints. There's also olivine, gem-like qualities. There's quartz that's rubbed with iron just naturally. There's sand that came from where the Twin Towers were. And then there's lines in sand. There's many activities that we do, and they're all sand related. It's more of what we're made of, how all the earth is made of. There's river where sand is made. There's the beaches where sand is made. Sand where we play, in the pool, underneath the pool. Here's something, the night sky is filled with stars, and there's more stars than all the sand on the Earth's beaches. There's 1% of land mass where sand is. This is volcanic sand of different types, of sand that was taken, and then some as is. Since we're in a maker space, the next one is going to be interesting. It's someone that's using solar energy to sinter something out of sand, which is really interesting. He makes bowls, other types of objects, and it's a real neat video if you get to look at it. Some artists and architects built a sand Babel. So it's an entire community that's based and lives in a tower. So it's a skyscraper. It's got water systems collections on the top. It's got aeration. It's got a bunch of other things. And it's made with a 3D printer. These are sandstorms. There's there's even sandstorms on Mars that make its environment different. There's sands in war, and most where I was in 2003. These are fracking sands. I'm not going to be able to read everything I wrote, but fracking, it's just quartz. It's very strong, and the high pressure liquid goes down, fractures, and then opens up. It's left there, and then we can get other stuff out of it. Fracking sand is actually putting on some of the technologies that are use that sand, including the forming. This is actually garnet and magnetite from Long Island. Chrome, actually stainless steel wouldn't be available if we didn't have this type of sand that's made either by crushing or by natural purposes. Lots of building materials we use sand in. Sand barriers, sand bags, grout. We find things in sandstone, like fossils and such. Stuffing from underneath clay tile on the roof, and then here's some art. Escher type. There's about sand doesn't organize itself. That's also and for some reason when we think of sands, we think of the pyramids. So I put them up there. Little honeybee. And then there's some other political statements about wars over sand and beaches, beachcombers are heading their sand. Egypt again, crosses. And sand can actually be very interesting. What would a talk be without cats and math? That's a sand cat. And what happens when you have excess sand from a project that you want to mold sand? You put it in a bucket, and then the sand, the cat thinks is something else. So now we have sand men, and this is actually the end of my 6-minute talk. And that's garnet from Nome, Alaska, if anybody's from Nome, and gold, because the black sand is what's left over from taking the silt and dirt out of the pan.
I will just tell you, I spend a lot of time with Mick, and he is like that every day. He really is. His mind is constantly curious, constantly wondering, constantly going through things. It's a whole different rhythm, and it is fabulously interesting and enjoyable. I'm going to ask, just for another about 5 minutes or so, I'm going to ask all of our presenters to just come forward here that we can give them another round of applause. And also, if you have a question for one of them, please feel free to give that. So Mike and Andrea and Kevin and Kathy and let's see, Mick, Sean, who am I missing? Robert, Jesse. Please give them all a round of applause. We have learned about counter counter intuition and sand and everything in between, pallets and life lessons and mad scientists who build machines and robots and etc. Any questions for this group? Nothing? They answered everything that you had as questions? It's perfectly okay.
I noticed you didn't see any pictures of sandwiches.
Sandwiches. You missed sandwiches. That's the other thing that happens. It makes people like Michael Oatman say stuff like that. Corey.
This is for Jesse. You had mentioned that you're building up to looking for some community support for the next phase of what you're doing with Margination, which is brilliant, by the way.
I'll repeat it.
How can people get involved?
Okay, so Corey's question saying with Cooperate and Prosper with Margination, you're talking, when you get to the next stage, you said you wanted some community support. How can people get involved?
Thanks for asking that, Corey, since I meant to bring it up in my presentation. This really is a tough format, so the questions are good at the end. I mean, here we are, a bunch of us from the audience just come and talk to us. It's kind of, things are so open-ended in development that it's really, what people have to offer and what we have to offer them at this point. We're looking for ideas, we're looking for collaborators, we're looking for business. That's a great way to get involved, is by supporting us. We offer some great services. And really just stay tuned, get on our list. There's going to be a lot more coming soon, more events, more information. Yeah.
Great. I will just tell you that when I first met Jesse, the economic coordinator, one of the people from the city, I won't say which one and what it was, asked me to check Jesse out. Is this thing coming to North Central Troy a cult? And it was just funny because, there was this whole thing, like Jesse's got kind of this quiet, very laid back Waco, Texas demeanor. And, no, really, he's this kind, wonderful guy, and it didn't have any of those aspects. And I said stuff to him like, well, will people live together? He said, well, I don't know, maybe. And, but there's no ideology at the root of it. It is, except for one simple, specific thing, and I think it's remarkable that just the notion that Jesse outlined about taking this stage of our economy and looking at whether we might cooperate makes people think we're absolute lunatics. And I find that by itself to be a pretty telling statement about society. So thanks, Jesse. Any other questions? Yes, please.
One of my questions is for Jesse again, which is you said the role of all of the people you're working with, but you never said what your role is in your job.
So our, right, I'm a cult leader. So the structure that we're developing is we have this network of enterprises, which right now we have 2 of, and underneath that network is a nonprofit that holds the resources that the enterprises share. So the nonprofit will own the buildings, it will own the vehicles, it will organize the cooperation between the enterprises, and don't go broadcasting this too much, but I'm the executive director of that nonprofit. So I'm in charge of development. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to practice my spiel, because this is one of the first times I've gotten to do it in a while, but that's kind of my job. Yeah.
Great. You said you had another question?
Yes. My next question is for Sean. I have a few questions actually. One is why you chose pallets, and do you use other repurposed materials? What's your experience with carpentry? And then also, do we have a chance to listen to some of your music since you didn't get to do it during the presentation?
I use pallets because they're free and lying on the side of the road, basically. And there's so much variation within them. You can find oak or maple or cherry or pine. And I do use other reclaimed woods. It's harder to find. There was this movie theater that tore down in Saratoga, and it had this beautiful wood. So I usually look on Craigslist if there's ads for barns that are being torn down. If anyone knows a building being torn down or something like that, rather than having the wood be thrown away. And I forgot do you have another question?
We're going to listen to your music.
Wanting to hear your music.
Oh, yeah. All right. I'm going to play it while the questions are going.
Anyone else, please? Erica.
Sean, I just have one question for you before you get distracted there. You said something really interesting about how in your family you have the support without the pressure of being, having this stable, say, corporate job. And as a parent, I'd love to be able to provide that sort of atmosphere for my kids. Although coming from 10 years in corporate world, I don't exactly know how to do it. Like what are your like specific things that your parents or your mom does to help provide that atmosphere for you?
You mean to provide the atmosphere for your kid to see that being a possibility?
Yeah, I mean in terms of, I recognize that it's an important thing, but there's some often when in society when you hear something really interesting, sometimes you don't know how to implement that.
I think my mom, as far as like letting go of the idea of what is supposed to happen. Like most parents have expectations, like your parents have expectations of you, and like so we sort of fall in line of what that is. And also letting go of the idea of like what it means to be successful as far as income, like how much you make or whatever it is. And I think your kids, like I feel like for my kid, it's really important for them to see you happy and seeing you do something that you're happy with, and like being able to take that risk of like, maybe I'm not gonna be able to afford to go out to eat as much, or maybe I'm not gonna be able to like buy that second house I had a dream of buying, or whatever it is, like that you feel like you need to attain. Like you have to let go of that and just be like, okay, well, I'm gonna downsize and just try to be happy and see through my potential of what it is that I see inside of me that I want to do, regardless of like what is expected of me.
Is there another question? Okay, good. We'll make this the last question.
To Kevin, if I want to learn and help building the paper boats, can I do that?
Thanks. That's also something I wanted to mention. So fantastic. Yeah, we're up at CAC Woodside all this week. If anyone wants to come by and learn about how to build these boats and give us a hand, that's totally welcome. We're going to have 8 of these boats to finish up over the next few days. And there's flyers and stuff that I'll leave over by near the door if you want to put one up so people know about it. Thanks.
I just wanted to let you know that we also had a weird coincidence tonight. I used to study foraminiferae. I have about a dozen papers on them. So it was cool to have a speaker who knew what they were, and it wasn't me.
Okay, one more round of applause, please, for this. I hope that this has turned you all into Pecha Kucha addicts. It's got to be one of the most fun forms of getting together and stimulating your brain you can think of. I hope you enjoyed the beer and quesadilla. Please, just as a review, come to the farmers market this Saturday to watch the Sea Change folks, or to help them carry boats through the market and prepare their launch. Get on a boat if they'll let you, if you want to. Sean's got a concert on September 13th. Make sure to ask her about that. Jesse says there are exciting things coming out that he has not yet told us about. Kathy's got a book coming out in October. Remember that. And given the creativity in this crowd, I think, and the Queen Map thing is what? October 4th, all right? And on September 23rd at CAC Woodside Center, Contemporary Artist Center Woodside, there is the next Pecha Kucha. Thank you all very, very much.